have outlined the general concepts of Chinese dwellings and houses. And for this lecture, we will more generally and specifically look into how this kind of dwellings was produced and physically how it was constructed. So the two ideas, the first is type and second is construction. In the very center of the Chinese courtyard houses is the idea of family. And the family you can see from these images, the building was enclosed by the very thick walls, and in the middle there is a courtyard, and the families was arranged in this kind of space. A study of the family of the courtyard houses in Huizhou shows that the owners of family actually have very different generations. You can see the owners was here, and we can find his family tree. So it can be traced back to the ancestors of the 31st generation and all the way to the 35 generations, which means many of the family members was actually live in the courtyard houses. So we can consider the different family members can be considered as the central programs of the Chinese courtyard houses. And normally, if you went to a Chinese house, a traditional Chinese house, in their living room, in the main building, you can find a portrait of the ancestors. And many of the portrait of the ancestors was shared by different villagers because they have the same ancestors there. And you can ask them to give you a chart like this, which shows you the descendants of the family members. Yes, you can see the owners of the house was standing in the middle, and his descendants was there. So actually, the house can accommodate a lot of programs inside. If therefore you, as the owners of one house, build up a very complicated familial network with his neighbors, such as if you as owners, you have two sons, and your sons will have his sons. Therefore, you can develop a family tree like this, and the family tree was precisely can be embodies the ideas of courtyard inside. And we can see, therefore, we can consider the Chinese courtyard house as a social template. A huge house like this is actually a representation of the family relationship with different family members. And we will see how this kind of space was produced in a spatial and a physical manner. A typical Chinese house is, the diagram shows a very typical Chinese house. To the left-hand side is the isometric drawing of a Beijing courtyard house. You can clearly identify the house has two courtyards, and each of the courtyards has a main building, and it was enclosed by a series of buildings around. And to the right-hand side, this is more clearly of the plan of the building. So we can see the main building was here with a space, interior space and exterior space, and another two buildings as a wing house enclosed on four sides. Therefore, we have one and two courtyard houses of the building. So in general, the courtyard house was composed with a single unit of a building like this. We call it main building. And the main building is, if we have a closer look of this main building, it was composed by a spatial ideas of modular bay. And in Chinese character, we call it kaijian. Kaijian is literally translated as opening a bay. And you can see a building like this is in the front, we have 4 columns, and in the depths of the building is 2 columns. Therefore, the space between 2 columns, we call it one bay or one yi kaijian. And then we can arrange a space like this, a rectangular space, in a line or in a row. Therefore, the building can develop into horizontally, into a Chinese single building. And then we can arrange this kind of building along the courtyard, and they can enclose a courtyard house and with corridors, with gates, and other service buildings. And that the former example is a 3 modular bay house building. And this one, you can see the building became elaborated, and a larger building like this is 5 modular bay. It has a central bay here, enclosed by or defined by 4 columns, these 4 columns. And you have another 4 columns on the 2 flanked the central bay, which extended house to the 4 sides. And the whole building, the interior space was composed by the 4 modular space and surrounded by a ring of corridors. Therefore, we can consider the building has a corridor and with 5 modular base space. And how this kind of space can accommodate the Chinese family life is what I wanted to talk about today. The very essential building like this, 3 modular bay. This is a diagram shows a building in Penghu, actually an island between China and Taiwan. And we can see the building has 3 modular bay, and in the central bay was used for the living room. This is a 3 people family, a father, mother, and a son. And to the right-hand side, the side base was used as a bedroom. And another side, it was used for the study rooms. Therefore, the 3 modular bay house can accommodate a very essential function of a family. But other service rooms can be arranged in the winged house. Therefore, this 3 modular bay house, and then you can put another 3 modular smaller ones on the 2 sides, and they will enclose the space like this. And you can put the kitchens and the storage and also toilets on these 2 sides. Therefore, it can become a 3-sided courtyard house. And once the family expanded, if you have 2 sons and your son getting married, and he has his own family, that is the extension of a family. Therefore, you can naturally, if you have land next to you, you can extend your house, and simply by adding 2 bays on the side and another base, therefore you can have another building which is related to the original building in the left-hand side. Therefore, it become a 2 courtyard house like this, and you can also extend it in the front. Therefore, a single 3-sided courtyard can accommodate the extension of a family, and in turns, the family relationship can be established throughout this transformation. Therefore, we can have a conclusion that the Chinese life was developed from the idea of kaijian, and the kaijian become a room that is a single building, and a single building arranged as a courtyard, and the courtyard will become a full-fledged functional houses. And the 2, if we consider the single courtyard house, it can be normally can have 2 types. The first type is this 3-sided house. That is, we have the main building. In this example, the central bay of the main building was used to accommodate the family altar. That is, the portrait of the ancestors will be there, and as well as the living room. And the parent will live in on this right-hand side, and the unmarried boys and girls is on the other side, and the storage and the kitchen. Therefore, 3 courtyard houses. If the family expanded or you have a larger family, you can choose a more elaborate one, such as the 5 modular houses like this. And it is not a 3-sided house, but a 4-sided courtyard house, in which the gate is not a freestanding wall, it become a building. Therefore, you can arrange a more elaborate entry manners in this four-sided house. This is just, the difference is not quite fundamental, but it related to the way you wanted to organize your house. So with the courtyard, you can see from the modular bay to the building and to the courtyard becomes the essential ideas of Chinese house. With the courtyard, we can arrange different spatial sequences of building. And the most elaborate example in this is that diagram shows you, the photo shows you the Beijing imperial city, where the wives of the emperors was living along with, you can see in the distance where the palaces were standing there, and this is where the wives of the emperors lived, and they will, each of them will have at least one courtyard. And once the courtyard expanded, a new idea will be introduced, that is Jin, literally translated as enter. Each Jin is a courtyard, is a courtyard unit, and you sorry. The Chinese courtyard house, although it's five-sided, it is essentially different from a quadrangle. The Western quadrangle is that a four-sided building, but with equally treated on each side. But for the Chinese courtyard house, the main building is most important, and therefore the wing house is secondary, and the lower ranking is the gate. Therefore, it is a courtyard, a four-sided building with hierarchy and with a spatial and social order. In a courtyard house of Jin, of one Jin, it should have a main building. For example, on the left-hand side, this is a very typical one Jin courtyard house. Although it has, you can see the gate was here, the people can enter in the first gate and entering into the first courtyard, and then you have another gate leading you to the inner part of the courtyard. And only this courtyard can be counted as a principal courtyard, which is the idea of Jin, is one courtyard with the main building. And if you have two main buildings, this is a two Jin courtyard house on the right-hand side. And you can enter into the forecourt and the first courtyard and the second courtyard, and there will be a rear courtyard in the back. And they will be arranged in a longitudinal way and in the direction of the depth of the building. Therefore, it giving you a spatial sequence, leading you into the more and inner and more private part of the building. Therefore, you can use the building as a private and public, halves into two halves. I give you an example of the Jinai, the idea of Jin. The photo shows you actually it is not a house, but very similar because Chinese building, temples, houses, and even palaces, they share the very idea of the courtyard. And this is the Yuelu Academy, Yuelu Shuyue in Hunan. And the photo shows a very large open ground in the front side, and the building standing and against it. This is a typical courtyard enclosed by walls. Because this is a gate hall, therefore you can see another courtyard at the back. So the idea is entering. You entering the gate, and you see the first courtyard, and then you're entering into another one. So which means you have a house of a multi-Jin courtyard house. And the most elaborate example of the Jin is in a palace building. In the palace, you can coordinate or mediate the size of a courtyard to emphasize or to elaborate the importance of each Jin. For example, in this diagram shows you one courtyard, palace. You are entering from the side room here, and you are facing a gate halls, and the first courtyard is more horizontal or oblong ones, not quite deep and not quite grandeur. And then you are facing a more grand, magnificent gate halls. And after you enter into the gate halls, the main building is standing to the back. Therefore, The sequence of the courtyard also giving you the sense of the deepness of the building. In addition to the idea of Jin, which is arranged along the axis of the building, another one is the idea of Kwa, in contrast to the Jin. The Jin, a building like this, have is a two Jin courtyard house, but it is also it is one Jin courtyard house, and there be two main buildings arranged in parallel into each other, which means it is not belongs to one family, it belongs to two families, but the two family members have a very intimate relationship. We can find this kind of buildings in many Shanxi examples, where such as in Chaojia Dayuan, when the family has two brothers and they running the same merchant life and they were living together. So they wanted to have their individual buildings, but one by one. Therefore, the idea of Kwa was developed. Not quite prominent as Jin, but they are still an example, another notions of the Chinese house, the courtyard. Therefore, for this building, I have two Kwa, which means you have a main building here, but just for one family, and you have another family living next to you, and they have another building. So that is the two Kwa building, and they share a rear room and a back. And the Kwa for sometimes can be used for single family. And you can see this house for Meilanfang. It has a single courtyard, main courtyard, and the main building, the side halls was arranged around this single courtyard. But there's another courtyard placed next to it without main building. This is a Kwa Yuan. We call it the horizontal courtyard. It was used for arrange the service room. Therefore, a rich or a wealthy family must have a lot of servants and other functional buildings. So they can place this kind of functional building and servants into the Kwa Yuan, and without any interference with the family life inside. And this is a very smart way of a spatial arrangement. And the Kwa was adopted as well. With the idea of Kwa and Jin, a courtyard, a very single courtyard can be expanded horizontally and laterally and horizontally. And we can imagine how this kind of large mansion was created. It has 1, 2, 3 main buildings. So ideally, it has it is a 3 Jin courtyard house, and with some of the service rooms arranged along the two sides. The idea of the family forms the central ideas of Chinese house, but the courtyard have another functions. It can be used for house and garden, and also for building and landscape buildings as well. And the courtyard can have multifunction. After it was produced, it is not only about the family, it's also about how the family wanted to use it. And the use of the courtyard also in turns gives a lot of spatial and physical characteristics of the building. The first one, and the very straightforward one, is the privacy and defense. A courtyard, the, the outer wall of the courtyard is always higher. No matter the building is 2 or 1 story high, it's always on the exterior of the walls, very small openings. Most of it was a solid wall, therefore provide privacy and defense of a building. This example shows you one of the Minnan dwellings. We can see a very thick brick walls enclosed the surrounding of the building. If there's windows, you can see this kind of masonry frames was attached to prevent any enemies or thieves to enter into the building. And the only formal entrance of building was a gate. So the courtyard throughout its arrangement can create privacy and defense for the family. But interior of a family, the courtyard, you can see it was arranged. Most of the main buildings was arranged around the courtyard, and the courtyard become the container of the life, and it becomes the climate moderator. In Beijing, in northern China, very harsh, cold winters, so the sunlight is crucial for the living conditions. The main building was facing south, therefore there will be no solid walls was used. Openings, most of the building was given you transparent openings. In Qing Dynasty, it should be have the windows, but with the attached papers, the window papers there. And the Meilan Fang, when he rebuilt the building, renovated the building, he replaced all these kind of papers into transparent glass. Therefore, to facilitate the ventilation as with light, the brightness of the interior space. And the courtyard, the sunlight can also give him the brightness of the courtyard. And for example, if the courtyard house was surrounded by the flat roof building, it was always dark inside. Because of the Chinese courtyard house have a pitched roof like this. Therefore, in the morning, when the sun rises, the sun is always located to the south of the house because the geographical location of China is to the north of the globe. Therefore, the sun is always in the south. And in the morning, the sun rises and the angle of the sunlight is almost similar to the angle of the roof, the pitched roof. Therefore, very easily you can introduce the sunlight into the space. And the sunlight also warm up the upper part of the air of the building. Therefore, a chimney effect can facilitate the natural ventilation of the space. The warmer the light is, it is light. The warmer the air is, it is lighter. Therefore, the natural vent can be created throughout the building. And if you're opening up the doors and the windows, and there will be the natural ventilation, such as a multi-courtyard building like this, you're opening up the doors, and this kind of natural cross ventilation can be greatly increased by this chimney effect. Therefore, you can consider if there's no courtyard, this kind of chimney effect can never exist. So we consider the courtyard as a climate moderator. And the scientific research also shows that the courtyard is really can create extra coolness during the summertime and warmness during the winter times. And in some rural areas, the courtyard can be used as a place of production. An example from this one, it is a city urban dwelling, but in Yunnan, a quite remote area of China, you can see it was a dwelling for a single family. Therefore, the courtyard was utilized as a field to plant vegetables, and some of the ground was still reserved. So when the when the vegetables can be eaten, you can gather your families there and to help each other. And sometimes if you have the grass field, if you have the rice field outside, and in the autumn, the season of festival, you are bringing these crops back to your house. You can use the courtyard as a space for with your family members as a space of production. A very unique or very regional usage of the courtyard. And for literati's house, a more elaborate way can be used. The courtyard house was can become a device to manifest the cultural and aesthetic taste of a family. We use a garden example to illustrate ideas, because in gardens, the distinction between gardens and dwellings is not that kind of clear cut. The garden is also always attached to a dwelling, and dwelling was, in a way, shares many characteristics of the gardens. And for these courtyard houses, we can see it is totally open to the landscape, and the cupolas with the text showing the grandness of the building and also the aesthetic taste of the owners. And the courtyard can be a carrier of many symbolic meanings, because it is considered the courtyard is where all the family members will be gathered. It has a lot of symbolic functions. For example, we can always find this type of motifs or openings in a courtyard house. It is a leaf from a tree, taking the shape of a leaf. Therefore, it indicates ideas of the leaf dripping from the branch of the tree and back to the root of the tree. The Chinese saying of 落叶归根, which indicates all the family members as a leaf branching out, going outside, distant, but eventually they were going back to the courtyard, which indicates where the ancestors and your fathers and your family members live. And in the courtyard houses, where in the courtyard you have a lot of this kind of if you're a rich family, you can decorate your courtyard with different fortune or auspicious decorations. Door panels is a very common place, because the courtyard, we have the solid enclosure for the for the exterior of the courtyard, but the inner part were all open to the courtyard. Therefore, we have a lot of the door panels. The Chinese do not have, they will always use this kind of door panels. In the upper part will be used as the windows, and the rear part for the privacy of the interior space is using the wooden panels. On the wooden panels, you can carve the different painting. On the upper part, for the window, you can have a hollows and openings, but very different ways of motifs. And the popular motifs includes this kind of 八仙, 8 fairies. This is the hidden 8 fairies, using their instruments to indicate the different the deities or immortals. And this kind of immortals symbolize the ideas of good fortune and longevity, so also carriers of good beliefs of the family. And some temporary symbols, decorations will be used, such as the paper cutting techniques during the Spring Festival is very popular in northern China. And in northern China, where the less wood were used, the brick carvings was a popular ways for rich families. In Shanxi and Shanxi, we'll always see this kind of carvings. And in southern China, the wooden carvings is more popular. And the two examples is from the southern China. We can see the Chinese novels of Three Kingdoms was carved, where also become a persuasive or educate the child or the family members of different moral beliefs of the family, such as you need to pursue the scholarly, pursue the martial art, and pursue the scholarly achievement. And the upper part is a story about a very prosperity families with 81 family members, which is related to the idea of a prosperity of a family. And this cuplets, this word is trying to reveal the ideas of how to be a good family members, how to achieve different, you need to have different ideas, and you need to have uh, to become a good man. So this kind of couplets, or what we call 对联, is trying to deliver this kind of ideas. Therefore, we can consider the courtyards with its decorations, with its texts, and with its arrangements become a didactic narratives. It is social templates where different social, cultural, and ideological ideas can be delivered. And for example, arrangement, a 光禄地 like this. 光禄 means that a very high-ranking officials of the in the government, almost like 尚书 is 光禄大夫 is one very high-ranking honorary title of a family, and in obviously one of the family and one of the ancestors of the family who built this house have achieved this kind of high ranking. Therefore, he placed these titles there to indicate this glory. And then you will decorate. All the decoration will be arranged around the courtyard and all the way extended into the living rooms. Therefore, all these kind of things was trying to deliver the ideas of to how the meanings or the beliefs of the family. And some other examples beyond the courtyard, such as the paifang, the gateways, is also a one famous or prominent type of architecture, trying to deliver the idea to extend the ideas of the family's belief. This is always built for the female family members. If they do something very good to raise a very successfully raising a child to become a high-ranking officials, you can build up a paifang like this outside of the village to symbolize or to glorify, to let others know that the family members become very successful, and they all the way going back to the courtyard. So we have talked about different functions, multiple functions of the courtyard. Some of the functions is physical, such as the privacy and defense, the climate moderator, and the social and production. It is a space of social network and production. But some of them are more spiritual or more ideological, that is aesthetic and symbols, and it become a didactic narratives. And another part beyond, we have a general ideas about how the courtyard was arranged and its meanings. So how this kind of courtyard house was physically made is another part of what we'll discuss here. That is art of construction. The diagram shows this is a wooden block print of a technical book from Ming Dynasty, which shows a carpenter on the right-hand side is sawing using the saws to cut the wood, and another carpenters on the right-hand side using the axe to making a hole on a timber structure, and the background they are painted against a background of column and beams, which means they are making a building. A building like this, a Chinese building, as we have said, it is 3 modular bay building, and we can identify 2 materials, principally the timber structure and the bricks. And more specifically, you can see the upper part, the tiles, and the bricks. The tiles was used for roofing, and the bricks was used as enclosure structure. Another one is the wood. was used as the main body of the building. And the stones and the bricks are used for the foundation. So if we can distinguish them into three types actually: wood, bricks, and stone. And all the bricks are made of mud and clay, or different types of soils. And we can see the composition here clearly. The different arrangement of columns and beams can produce the triangular framework of the interior wooden structure. And on the two sides, the solid wood was used to enclose the space. The construction scene from the Zhejiang area in the recent days, once the owners of a building want to rebuild a house, they will tear down all the rotted or original timber structures, and they will build this kind of timber structure on site, and they will reserve the original rammer's wall around it. So you can see a very clear contrast between wood and the enclosure of mud or clay. And the basic structure system of a house was composed by the enclosure walls of brick and the timber structure and the roof. We can identify in terms of the timber structure, we can identify different components, structural components. That is the rafter, and purlins, and the columns. And these three types of timber components can create a framework of like this, and they can arranged horizontally in parallel to making the space in between. That is the modular bay. And this picture taken from a vernacular house from Quanzhou in the 1980s shows you this is a column, and this is purlin. Purlin is placed on top of the column to connect the different modular bays. And another building component running perpendicularly to the purlin, we call it beam, and this is beam. And different layers of beam can create the slope of the roof. And then on top of the beam, we have this purlin, and on top of the purlin, we have the rafter. These smaller members we call rafter, 船子. And on the rafters, tiles will be placed. Therefore, a very simple skeleton of building can be created. And different types of building structure can be produced, but their general principles remain similar. For example, to the right-hand side, we call it columns and ties, 穿斗式. This is always used in vernacular houses, where you can easily find smaller members, the timber members, used as columns. And all these columns was tied by these beams. The beams were penetrated inside of the columns. Therefore, you can create a framework like this. And you will align the framework and connect them with the purlins and place rafters there and with tiles. And to the left-hand side, we call post and beam, 举架式. And this type can create larger column-less interior space, which requires large column size, because you need to have a longer span between two columns, which means the beams must be strong, and the column, it should have the similar capacity of to support these beams. So you can compare these two types. The post and beams is always used in governmental buildings or high-ranking buildings as the palace, and also the wealthy merchant's house, and the trundle, the columns and tie construction system is popularly adopted in the vernacular or poor people or ordinary people's house. And for Chinese building, there's no iron nails will be used. They are rely on this very delicate joinery to connect the building vertically and diagonally. And we call it mortise and tenon. Mortise tenon means mortise means this type. 榫卯, 榫 means this kind of extrusion of a joinery, and you can make holes so they become a pair. And for example, for this diagram, the columns and the beams was connected by this very simple way, the simplest way of joinery. And if the corner columns, so the beams will be inserted in the different angles. Therefore, the openings will be different. And there's other ways for other treatments of buildings. So in this way, we can create a house. Once we have the capacity of creating a house, we must consider where it was situated. Professor Wang have introduced the principle of Feng Shui. And the idea of Feng Shui actually is how you can situate yourself and your house within the broader geographical environment. And this kind of tradition can be dating back to very ancient times. And it was this is Ming Dynasty wooden block print showing Taibao Xiangzai. Taibao is the name of the brother, the Duke of Zhou Gong's brother. So he's considered this man. He's considered the creator or inventor of the very grandmasters of the Feng Shui. And he tried to find a good place where the imperial capital of Luoyang will be situated. And later it became one major school of Feng Shui. Generally, they wanted to find the auspicious direction and surroundings for building, for house. And this is you have already seen this diagram showing you a very ideal location of a house. A house should have a back mountain and all the way to the grand mountain, the grandfather's mountain, all the way to Kunlun, that is the dragon's vein, Rongmai, all the way to the back. And in the front, you should have the rivers running. So if we consider it scientifically, you have a very open ground in the front and very securely situate yourself with back and mountains. And you have rich resources on the two sides. So it is considered a very good Feng Shui. It can be translated in a very Feng Shui terms, and also can be understood nowadays in a scientific manner. But many of these ideas in the imperial or the Ming imperial eras will be translated or interpreted in a mystical ways, such as if you want to have a river in front of it, which means this is for good fortune. And we already understand if you have rivers, you can lead you to a very you have a water resource and it will not flood your house, and it can lead you to a long distance. So that is good. And if you have something blocks the front, which prevent you have a very open view in front of it, that is unlucky. So for example, if you have trees planting directly in front of your house, particularly for big trees, that is unlucky. And so we can understand this is in void of avoidance of the idea of the open ground in front of us. And your house should have a very deep and long site. That makes sense because always we want to have a multi-courtyard house, a multi-courtyard Jin house, and the Jin is arranged to the depths in the direction to the depths of the building. So if the building site is deep, that is very convenient for you to creating a deep house. And also if you have water in front of it, that is lucky. So you can translate these folk beliefs into a modern or reasonable language nowadays of site planning. And the surrounding ideas of dragon, the translation of using the different animals to represent different directions can also be incorporated to the houses, such as the rear house is considered as a black turtle, and the side house becomes the dragon, and the white tiger, and the southern house becomes the red phoenix. Therefore, there'll be the ideas of which part should be higher and which part should be lower, and sometimes it will have, according to different situations, have different sayings and interpretations. But this kind of ideas has been deeply ingrained into the Chinese making of buildings. And another way is we need to decide the size of a house, and even the scale or the dimension of the house have the symbolic ideas. We're using the Luban rulers. The Feng Shui masters use the Luban rulers to indicate which is the auspicious or lucky dimension of the house. And this kind of dimension always related to the birth date of the owners. So there will be a lot of very complicated calculation behind it. And even for the orientation of the house is considered different orientation will be good for the owners or bad for the owners. This kind of, so it become very, even in Hong Kong and in Southern China, it is very prominent and popular nowadays, but not quite popular to the north, because in the north, the southern direction is always important. You must have sufficient sunlight during the winter times. But in the south, the north face southern direction is not that kind of important. And this kind of south facing principles is always challenged by the landscape. You can not always find an ideal place where you have the northern mountain and the front view in the mountainous south. Therefore, how to find an auspicious orientation become important in the southern China, such as the Lubanchi was used. And also using 8 diagrams, 八卦, to select a good date of construction. So always in Chinese traditional construction, the construction itself always mingled with these kind of auspicious folk beliefs. We use some specific examples, such as the ritual of corners. For building, the corner is quite important structurally. It is a weak point. So this is the reason behind. Therefore, in the folk belief, it was translated that there be the god for the 4 corners, and you need to worship the god before you start your construction. So the carpenters will worship the corners. They'll put the plates, writing the incantations on the plates, and to bury them in the 4 corners before the construction. And after that, they wanted to erect the post or the columns. The columns, the success of the construction is fundamentally related to the whether you erect a column in the right way or not. Therefore, you need to have some rituals when you practicing the construction of the column. And after you erect your columns, you can put the beams and posts on top of it. And I use this diagram shows you. You have the columns, and you can create. You have a lot of materials imported to your site, and the carpenters will measures on site how long the column should be, and how tall another column should a beam should be. Therefore, they can create the joineries and to put them assemble them on site. So that is a very sustainable way of making space. And after we create the columns and other beams, the large beams is become important because it is the topmost place of a building, therefore considered quite important. And even nowadays, if you went to different buildings, dwellings, vernacular dwelling in Hong Kong or in southern China, and in ancestral halls, when you're looking upwards, you can see the topmost beams was painted in red, which means it has special importance in related to the rituals and to the beliefs of the people. And always you have some auspicious text writing and hanging there to wish that this can stabilize the location of the beams. And in addition to the main framework, other things should be pay attention to, such as the foundation. Every building should have a foundation in order to prevent the wooden column to be rotted during rainy seasons. The foundation was sometimes, for the ordinary buildings, it was produced by the rammed earth, that you place the earth there and using the temper to make them, consolidate them into very thick, solid layers. And for the rich families, you can coat it, the rammed earth, with the granite stones, and you can make staircase in the middle. And the rammers, after you have the columns, you need to have the enclosure. And the enclosure, the ordinary, one of the most popular way and efficient economic way is that you can get the earth from your field and making the earth into a very thick wall. And the thick walls built step by step. And you have a very shallow wooden framework in this way to place on the full side of the site where you wanted to have the wall, and you infill the ram earth inside of this shallowed framework, and you use the long bars and your foot to squeeze them and to making them solid and thick and heavy. Therefore, one layer by one layer, you can create a long rammed earth wall, and it will be very it is a sustainable structure, and even nowadays become very popular in modern projects, and it can create a very comfortable thermal comfort inside of a building. It is breathable. Unlike the concrete buildings, it is breathable, so they can moderate the temperature inside. But they have its weak point, but I will not discuss today. And you can see how this kind of earth can be derived just in the neighboring fields. And another way of a more a costly way of making the wall is to make brick. Brick is similar to the rammers, but it is a particular soil we call clay. And you put the clay, and the diagram shows you that you put the you need to bake the clay into a brick. This is a kernel of the brick where you get fires and you put the brick on top of it, and it will bake for 1 or 2 days and making the bakes. You can see the tiles, and the tiles was piling up in the background of the diagram. And this shows you how you can make the brick on site. if for a ram earth wall, the wooden framework is larger, but the principle quite similar. You put the mud inside, but for the ram earth wall, you do not bake it. But for the clay, you bake it and it become a prefabricated material, and then you can make a brick wall. This is more strong and but more costly. Another one is a tile. Tile is also made up by the clay, but you using the circular device, and you infill the circular device and making a circle like a cone. And after that, you use an iron like this. This is actually a tile, and you're using the iron line wires to cut them into halves. Then you can have tiles. So that is a smart way to making the tiles in an efficient manner. After construction, the construction is not the wish for good fortune and to expel the evil and the unpleasant things. It's not only existed throughout the construction, but also in many decorations will manifest this idea. For example, in the very same building from Quanzhou, you can see this is a beam, purely structural members, and you can have the rich decoration below it. So this is structural and decorational component, and this is the short column used to create another layers of beams, and the surface of the short columns become a demon. The demon is used to expel consider they can expel the evils and other things that was disable or making the main structure unstable. So that is a motive for the good fortune. And the motives can exist everywhere in the building, such as in the main ridge of the building. The three deities, Sanxing Fu Lu Shou, the deities of prosperity, good fortune, and longevity was there. Also, the owners wanted to have many good fortunes for his families. And even on the doors, on the locks, we can see this kind of motives. And Chinese shares and developed different types of motives. Sometimes it's related to the word, the pronunciation of the word, such as you can see this one. Do you know what this is? This is actually a bat. The bat in Chinese means 福, 蝙蝠, is the pronunciation is similar to the word of good fortune, especially the bat is overhanging there. So the bat is always hanging there invertly. So 道福道 means that the good fortune is coming. So therefore the bat become a very popular motive of good fortune in China. But in Western traditions, the bat is always considered evil. And also nowadays in the coronavirus was spread fiercely, the bat has become a very is considered one of the major carriers of this virus. So it's quite different from the Chinese ideas. And you can see from the other one, the bat was surrounded the character of lucky. And in in the right hand side one, we can see a vase, 平, 宝瓶. And the vase is considered the motives of auspicious, because it can produce the water, and the water is considered as prosperity. So the shape of the vase is also a pottery, is a Chinese popular motifs used in the buildings. And this is trying to bring in the good fortune. We have another one that is to defense of the unpleasant things, such as the popularly used in northern China, the carvings of 泰山石敢当. 石敢当 is actually believed as a warrior from Qing dynasty, a very strong warriors can protect the Emperor Qing, the first emperor of China. So later it become a motive that it can expel the different evil spirit and manners. And in this, in the Shandong, we can see this kind of Taishan Shigandan was actually placed on the corner of the building. So the corner, the importance of corner is revealed again, the weakness. So we need to something to expel it, the evil spirit. And also the Taoist incantations will be placed sometimes on the main ridge, on the main beams, and even in the gate halls, we can see the diagrams and this kind of lighting, the thunder and the thunderbolt that can zhenzai, can stabilize the buildings to expel this the demons away from the building. So this kind of things is used to the Chinese ways of for the good fortune and of the family. Okay, so we have introduced two things basically. The basic arrangement of Chinese house from the modular bay to a single building to a courtyard, and then developed into Jin and Kwa and expanded. And this kind of expansion was related fundamentally to a family relation network. And another one is that how this kind of space was created through the triangular timber framework, and how it was made, constructed. And throughout the construction, we can see a different way of introducing good fortune. So it is about anthropology, the study of the culture, and also study of architecture. Sorry, light is off, so I need to standing up. The last part is I will very quickly going through what we were talking about later about different types of dwellings in China. We were using 3 lectures in the following lectures to develop talking about discussing regional dwelling houses in China. The first, so that is we understand the prototypes, and the variation is very interesting because it cares, it related to the people's practice and their different geographical cultural context, and how they respond to this kind of challenges and also opportunities in different region of China. For example, and their forms is quite attractive. We can see, for example, in the south, these kind of Huizhou dwellings, and in the north, Beijing dwellings, and in the Guangdong area, the south, the Lingnan dwellings. Their arrangement can be abstracted in the form of unit and the courtyard house. So the arrangement, the principle was there, but different carpenters and designers can accommodate it in the different ways. So we would first talk about the north, that is Huabei region, and then we'll move to the lower Yangtze River to see Huizhou buildings, and then even south to see the Hakka buildings. The northern part, we're talking about the sunken dwellings and the Beijing courtyard house. The sunken dwellings in Henan and Shanxi, a very unique type of courtyard making into and learned from and also taken benefits of the very thick yellow earth in China. But we also see the same area, more ordinary or common dwellings, courtyard dwellings in the cities. And they have this type of very high thick walls. So how this kind of, why they use the very thick walls to high walls around the buildings and with narrower courtyard. In Beijing, it was related to the creation of the urban fabric with hutong and of spacious courtyard, single-story dwellings, multiple courtyard, much wide courtyard. So comparing to Shanxi, why the courtyard is so wide, and why the building can have such a large asset or a site to be used. And the typically Beijing dwelling, you can see the atmosphere is quite different from the Shanxi and the sunken dwellings, although they are located in the climatically similar region. And then we move to the mountainous and the water towns in the south. So the material culture and the dwellings produced drastically different from the north. And the using of materials with the gray tiles and the dark wood is different, and even different different ways of the openings is delivering another way of aesthetic taste. And sometimes in the mountainous remote courtyard houses, they can develop intimate relationship with the surrounding landscape. And in a large villages, the steppe-like Matouqiang become a prominent visual characteristics of the dwellings, and how this kind of high white stucco walls were used, rather than we can see the slopes of the roof in the north. So, generally speaking, why the wall is so high and the courtyard is so narrow and become a sky whale in the Huizhou dwellings, and how it was related to the female space. Who is the dwellers, the difference, who is the dwellers of the building, and what is their relationship to the metropolis of Suzhou and Shanghai. And lastly, we will see another courtyard dwelling type that is not a single dwelling, but a complex in southern China, in the Ningnan region, a clan family living as a village together, and we call Wei Wu, the enclosed, the walled house, the walled complex. In Fujian, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, they are not only produced by the local people, but the Hakka people, which means the migrants of later times. And in the villages, and the rich merchant house in Macau and Hong Kong, in the late 19th century, the interaction between Western cultures and the local Lingnan cultures produced, you can see a lot of different motifs and construction manners was related to their intimate relationship with the exotic and foreign influence behind. And the courtyard houses in Hong Kong, we're going to visit one of them if we still have the chance in March or April. And the lanes inside of the building, and even this kind of house type were extended to Fujian, such as in Taiwan, were quite similar. And in the rural area of northern Guangdong, the Weilong Wu, also another type of wood, the enclosed wood house complex, but with circular shape. Why the circular shape was used and back is also one of our quest of the knowledge. And the Hakka houses in Fujian, Jiangxi, the circular houses, what is its difference? Although the dwellings is also a group of families, why they are shaped in such a unique form? And how this kind of circular forms was developed according to our studies of different types of walled houses in Fujian, from Wufenglou, the Five Phoenix mansion, and to this circular mansion, and their relatives in Jiangxi, And so this is basically our 3 lectures on the dwelling houses. But our interest, we also encourage you to have even in your final projects, or you can doing extra studies of other courtyard houses, such as in Yunnan, in Sichuan. The material similar, but with slightly or interesting differences, and the arrangement of courtyard is different. So you can use our knowledge from our lectures to extend it to search and explore different types of courtyard houses in China. And in Sichuan, you can see the courtyard is 3-sided even without the front walls in the rural area. And this is a very typical Sichuan courtyard. And in northern China, very northeast, the houses is arranged in Jilin, arranged differently, even without courtyard. Why the courtyard disappeared in Jilin? And the building has loosely arranged. You can see the arrangement is quite loose. Sometimes the courtyard was being dissolved. And the ideas, and even in our Korean peninsula, the courtyard idea is still there, but treated differently, as the living mood of the Korean people is different from Chinese. But they also using the triangular framework and the timber structure and enclosed walls to formulate their space. And we can see from the diagrams, their space is different from Chinese, and they will not share the ideas of the Jin, but most likely they wanted to prefers to arranging their courtyard in parallel or in a different manner. So how this kind of arrangement can facilitate their lives. And this is one of the courtyard houses. You can see the similarities and difference with Chinese courtyard houses. So this is basically what we will introduce